And, it's just helpful to be more informed. It allows us to be more effective, as I said, and bear more fruit. And when it comes to the utterance gifts, which we haven't gotten to yet, to have biblical understanding of how to operate in prophecy and tongues and interpretation of tongues is very important, because that gift above all has been abused. Those utterance gifts have been abused more than any other. And there are specific guidelines in the Bible to help keep us on track and on target. And as I said, we haven't gotten to that yet, but we're on our way. So let me give you these definitions, and I won't do this again, but I realize we really haven't done this, and so I want to go through all 9 gifts and their basic, simple definitions. So number 1, we're going to do first of all the power gifts. The 3 power gifts would be, in order that we gave them, would be the gifts of healings, or working of miracles, gift of healings, and gift of faith. And let me give you those definitions. I don't want to get this wrong. I have mountainous notes. I have so many notes, and they're in the study notes, and it would be good if you got it. Let's do the gift of faith first. So the gift of faith is one of the power gifts, and the definition is the gift of faith is a supernatural operation of the Holy Spirit in the experience of the possessor, which enables him or her to sustain an unwavering trust in God for His personal protection and for the provision of His needs. So it would be supernatural faith, like Daniel in the lion's den. He had faith. He didn't really do anything other than just believe, and he was confident, and he had so much faith he literally went to sleep that night while the king was worried about him. So that would be the definition of the gift of faith. Working of miracles. Here's the definition of the working of miracles. It is the supernatural demonstration of the power of God by which the laws of nature are altered, suspended, or controlled. So when the laws of nature are controlled, when Jesus walked on water, that was a working of miracles. When Moses stretched out his rod and the Red Sea parted, that was a working of miracles. That it suspends suspends the laws of nature and does something that's completely impossible. And we talked about Elijah and how he called down fire on the altar, and that was a working of miracles. And then we'll go to the gifts of healings. And the gift of healings, the definition is they are manifestations of the Holy Spirit in the sphere of diseases. So miracles wouldn't necessarily have to do with physical healing, but the gifts of healings always would have to do with healing. And so it's the supernatural manifestation of the Spirit, a spiritual and supernatural manifestation of the Holy Spirit given to the church for the purpose of removing sickness, disease, and infirmities. And the gift of healings is more in operation in the New Testament. The working of miracles is more in operation in the Old Testament. The Old Testament was proving the power of God, His almighty power, and demonstrating that to the people. In the New Testament, we're demonstrating the love of God and the mercy of God. And that is demonstrated in the act of healing of bodies and healing of limbs. And so we see that more pronounced in the New Testament, and we're going to get into some interesting things along those lines as well. Let me give you the revelation gifts. The revelation gifts are 3 as well, and it would be the word of wisdom, the word of knowledge, and the discerning of spirits. So the word of wisdom, the definition of the word of wisdom, it is that the Spirit of God reveals when He reveals things to come respecting the world, nations, cities, or individuals. It is by the word of wisdom that we see the plan and purpose of God in the future. Things that He's working out in a life or in a nation or in the world globally. And so that would be the word of wisdom. The word of knowledge is similar but a little different. In the word of knowledge, we understand something that is or was supernaturally. So if someone calls out a sickness that is in someone's body, in their lungs, or a cancer, or a tumor, any kind of ailment, a heart issue. Those are words of knowledge. It's the revelation of something that is. And it's not by understanding, it's not by any, there was one person who was accused of having an earpiece, and people went through the audience and found out who was sick with what or who was dealing with what, and they would speak it into his ear. That's not the word of knowledge. The word of knowledge comes directly from the Spirit of God. And I'll just tell you this, I've seen Mario Murillo's ministry in public, and I've never seen a more specific and dramatic operation of the word of knowledge than in his ministry. I mean, I've seen him call out people to stand in the aisle, and he said, you've been in a car wreck and it affected your neck and your back and your lungs and you can't breathe. And I mean, just very specific. And the person's just agreeing with everything. And then he combines that with gifts of healings, and you have the word of knowledge which calls it out in gifts of healings, and then the person gets totally healed. And so that's how the gifts will work together. Many times the gifts of the Spirit work together. We separate them in study to just understand their differences. But many times, like a flame, you take two flames and put them together and they look as one. Many times prophecy and the word of wisdom work together. And we'll see that as well as we get into the utterance gifts. Number 3 is discerning of spirits. That is also a revelation gift, and the definition is it's discerning of spirits gives us insight into the spirit world. We might say that discerning of spirits is a gift of the Holy Spirit by which the possessor is enabled to see into the spirit world. It's not just the discerning of devils. If all they ever see is devils, that's probably not discerning of spirits. That's and it's not just discerning of problems or faults in other people. That's more of the spirit of criticism, and that's not one of the 9 gifts of the Spirit. So if someone is always critical and they call that discerning of spirits, that's really not the case. When a person operates in the discerning of spirits, they may see an angel, they may see a demon, they may see Jesus, they may see visions in the spirit world, but they discern things, even in human spirits, but they discern supernaturally in the spirit world. So that would be the 3rd gift of revelation. And then the utterance gifts are very, very familiar with us. Prophecy, of course, has been around from the beginning. It was operated in Old Testament time. So you have prophecy and you have tongues and interpretation of tongues. So prophecy, you can see that in the Old Testament. However, the other 2, tongues and interpretation of tongues, are unique to this dispensation because tongues wasn't really in operation until the dispensation of the Spirit. And because tongues and interpretation of tongues are distinctive to this dispensation, we have more of that in operation generally. You'll see that more in operation. It's more common to see tongues and interpretation and in charismatic movement, charismatic churches. And that's one of the things as a denominational person that blew my mind when I came out of the denominational world and got Spirit-filled. And you go into churches and see people speaking in tongues and interpreting it, and it's a demonstration of the Spirit, and it's supernatural. Of course, it's been abused. Let me give you the definitions. Number 1, prophecy. Prophecy is defined in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 3. It says, "He that prophesies speaks unto men to edification, exhortation, and comfort." So prophecy is really just an edification, an exhortation, or a comfort from the Spirit. It's supernatural in its origin. In other words, you don't study in order to prophesy. You don't study and plan this discourse and then give it as a prophecy. It comes by inspiration of the Spirit on the spot, and it doesn't necessarily foretell. If it were to foretell something, then that would be a word of wisdom in the prophecy. And if it were to reveal something that would be word of knowledge in the gift of prophecy. But simple prophecy is edification, exhortation, and comfort. And so most people, when they think of prophecy, they think of foretelling the future. That's really the word of wisdom. So the simple gift of prophecy is edification, exhortation, and comfort. So that when God uses you along these lines, you don't need to feel like you need to tell somebody's future or see into the future at all.
Visit gregfritz.org to download the MP3s for free by entering code FREE at checkout.